Welcome to the Personal Development Mastery Podcast. Stand out, don't fit in. This is the second half of the interview with Rob Scott. If you want to listen to the first part, go back to the previous episode, number 37. Talking about beliefs, I like very much the analogy that you mentioned at some point of the lens. And what, even though I had heard of the lenses, the minds as metaphors for our beliefs or our mindsets, there was something that really made an impression on me, that a lens by its own nature is not something that you pay attention to it. You look through it, but you don't look at it. So our beliefs, or this, as I'm holding my lenses now as an analogy, allow us to paint or tint our perception, but we don't really see the lens at all. We just see past the lens.
Yeah, so it's the way I usually share that is that there's two functions of a lens, and most of us are only aware of one of them, right? Mm-hmm. So, and I literally, just to start from the very beginning, I'm talking about lenses like your glasses, right? Like you were holding on to, contact lenses. If people don't wear glasses, they've certainly looked through a microscope or a telescope, right? The function of a lens that we're all aware of is it alters what we see, right? It changes what we see. And the right lens can alter it in a way that's really helpful, right? My glasses are definitely a big help to me. But if I were to just put randomly any glasses on, or I were to put many glasses on, right? All of a sudden I can't see very well, right? Now, that's interesting, right? So lenses alter what we see. That's a really important concept to get. The second concept that most people don't think about is that lenses are built to be invisible, right? They're not built to be considered. They're actually built to be looked through and kind of forgotten, right? So while I'm wearing my glasses, I don't really consider my glasses ever. I just bebop through the world dealing with this altered thing. Yeah. So much so that if I wore rose-colored glasses, quite literally, in the beginning, I might notice that it's different, but eventually that would become normalized to me. Like I wouldn't consider that the world was any other way. And in fact, if I really didn't know I was wearing rose-colored glasses, I wouldn't know any other colors other than, the rose tint that I'm looking through. Well, the analogy is that our beliefs and our thinking is very much like that, right? Our thoughts and our beliefs alter our perception in a deeply meaningful way, but they too are built to be invisible, right? We take them on to be the truth of the situation. So if I take on a belief about politics, right, and I don't know, I can't see that it's my belief, I'm actually looking through the lens of it, I only see the truth of that perspective, right? And so if that's a limit, like I'm not enough, or I don't like money, or whatever those things are, I'm now being altered by that, but I'm not considering it as only a certain lens that I could be wearing. It seems like truth, just like this seems like my real vision once I forget about my glasses, right? So the fundamental shift is to actually be able to take off the lenses, the beliefs that you're holding that are holding you back, and actually look at them and shine them up or throw them away, put on better ones, like get to the right lenses that are the most useful, that most helpful to you, that are not delusional, that don't get you to a place that's like, saying I am a millionaire, I am a millionaire, I am a millionaire when you're not is delusional. That's not helpful. But saying I love growing my money and I love, showing up so that I can make money might be really useful, right? So what's the right lens, the important lens to put on? So it's not just about any old affirmation. It's about taking on and really taking in to your sense of self and your beliefs, the right lenses that are good, and ultimately growing the meta skill of being able to see lenses. So back to glasses for a second, I would consider these lenses as soon as there was raindrops on them, right? That would make me aware of my lenses, and I'd have to take them off and clean them to put them back on. Or if I had scratches in my lenses, I would know that I would have to go get new glasses, right? But with our beliefs, because they're so hard to see, we often don't notice the scratches, and we end up with really messed up glasses that we're looking through on the world. And through that, we self-sabotage, we hold ourselves back. We live very limited, sheltered, often very safe lives, but the world isn't as dangerous in the same ways that it used to be. So we've taken on all these safety protection mechanisms that are really holding us back to what's deeply possible for us.
I liked very much you mentioned the contact lenses, and it's probably a different level altogether, because with the lens of the glasses, yes, normally you're not aware of it, but at some point you might see the rim or something like
You might
that, and
notice it a little bit, or it might bump into something, right? It might,
yeah.
you lay down on a pillow and all of a sudden you're like, oh, I've got glasses on, right? You forget,
But
and then
the
you
contact
remember.
lenses, you really goes completely without
Correct.
you realizing it at all.
Correct. Yeah.
So
Or I
there
mean,
are,
imagine LASIK surgery that's good enough that you leave and you're happy with it, but it's not perfect, right? But you
yeah,
think that's how the best seeing is, but
how,
it still could be better, right?
yeah.
Yeah.
So I suppose then, if we want to change our lenses, our limiting beliefs in that sense, the first thing to do is to identify that we actually are wearing lenses that they do not serve us, and then
Yeah.
work from there.
Awareness itself can be curative, right? So sometimes if you can see the lens,
Mm-hmm.
that alone breaks the spell of it, right?
Yeah.
So that is helpful, right? So just getting, and oftentimes because they're invisible to us, this is why you sometimes need a coach or a therapist or somebody like that to help you identify, what am
Yeah.
I not seeing here? Like what am I not getting? And sometimes just a laser coach can come in and go, hey man, like boop boop boop, or hey lady, here's what's happening for you. And you go, and then it never has that same effect. Now, many of them are so deep, especially the ones down at the identity level, that just seeing them, we actually need to go do some work. We need to actually change them in a little bit deeper way. And that's where some
Mm-hmm.
of these tools, like we've mentioned, shadow work, timeline therapy, doing things like story casting, things like that are very powerful to shift profound limiting beliefs. But
Mm-hmm.
without doing that, you're left limited in ways that you're blind to, right? That are holding you back, which is maybe a little scary for some, but it also, I hope, is really exciting, right? Because there's a more idealized version of you that's possible, right? There's a version of you that can be more universally confident, more universally ready to take action, more focused, more happy, has emotional mastery, that these persistent anxieties and worries and things that make us sad can really be transcended in a profound way, so that your base level way of being is just way more idealized.
Mm-hmm. In your experience, how easy is it to uh, dispose of limiting beliefs that really hold someone down?
Very, very much quicker than you would think.
Mm-hmm.
And so, one of my problems with some of therapy is that you end up in a long story where you've identified the lens.
Yes.
Well, that's because your mom did that when you were 5. And so now the conversation moves, because the therapist is also human, and you end up in this long conversation about every week how that one limit from when you were 5 years old is still affecting you today. Well, see it again. That's why. That's why. That's why. So identifying it can be transformative, and that
Mm-hmm.
is important, and that is the first step. But then getting beyond it, actually putting it
Mm-hmm.
down, actually creating a new reality for yourself now, where that is no longer true for you, is the real transformation, right? That's the thing where it's no longer interesting to even carry it, because it happened in the past. It's done. We're now done with it. And
Mm-hmm.
now it no longer is relevant in the same way. In fact, now I've taken on a new way of being that's profoundly different. And that's the real transformative move. That can be done very quickly, right? So I have a mastermind program that I do with a small group of people, and every single time between about week 2 and week 3, everybody has this collective kind of um, uh, awareness of, this is ridiculous. Why have I been carrying this? And there's a freedom that comes with that,
Mm-hmm.
that is a permanent shift, right? And so it literally is about a week or two, really only like 1 or 2 sessions, where we can really get through those. We can find them and meaningfully get past them. And then is the part of putting in the new ones, which really only takes another, week or two, honestly.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
remember something you said earlier about waking up and
hmm
growing up.
Correct. Yeah. So think about that. The wake up is seeing them as a form of wake up. Transforming them into the new thing is waking up also, right?
Mhm.
It's installing that new thing. And then grow up is then applying that in your life meaningfully in all the directions, right?
Yeah.
So now that you're not afraid to give public talks, because we've gotten rid of that phobia, how do we then go apply that so you can go do big talks actually in the world? It's not just about, well, now I'm not afraid of it if it ever comes up, but if it's important to you to go share some message, let's get you on stages, right? And so that's going to take time. You have to find the stage, you have to get the people, you got to do the things, right? That's the grow up. And what you'll find if you do that and apply that, 3 months later, 6 months later, 10 years later, you've now become, a deeply different person, but it was sourced in that change that was in the wake up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Rob, let me ask you something else. You mentioned earlier self-sabotaging. So give me your thoughts on why do people self-sabotage and how can they stop?
I think we've been talking a lot about how they can stop, and we'll come back to that in a second. I think one of the reasons that we self-sabotage is that it is a comfort level. Let's re-say that. It's so I think that we end up in a comfort zone, right? A lot of people talk about like a thermostat on a wall, that we end up with. I can be this happy and I'll only be this sad, and if I hit those limits, I go here. What I like to tell people is that your comfort zone is often not very comfortable. Right? It's actually you're dying to get out of it, but it's not comfortable to get out of it. And that's because it's not really about comfort. It's more about familiarity. Okay. So what is familiar to you, what you're used to, is actually what's really okay to your subconscious mind. So your subconscious mind is all about surviving, right? It's not actually about being happy. It's about staying alive for the most part. Right. And so what it's done before, what is normal and has been okay before, what I woke up today and did yesterday, doing what I did yesterday habitually is okay to do again. That is the default pattern, right? So this is why breaking habits is difficult, because to our unconscious mind, that change is potentially dangerous because it's unknown to us, right? So self-sabotage quite often is, I have this big dream of what I'd like to be, but it's so different than what I am now that it's uncomfortable. It's unfamiliar. It's different to do that. So my system, my sense of self, will find ways outside of my conscious mind to sabotage back into what I'm normally comfortable with, right? So this amount of money, this amount of friends, this amount of business success, this amount of whatever is what we will self-sabotage back into. So many times you'll know, like let's say you're a business owner, you know that there's these 10 calls that you should make to go get these big sales, but you find ways to just be busy again today. Oh, I had to, rearrange this one drawer in my kitchen, or today I actually should do taxes or whatever. And if as a coach, if you came in and talked to them 3 months later, be like, did you ever make those 10 calls? They'd be like, oh no, I never got to that, whatever. That's an unconscious form of self-sabotage that's normalizing us to stay playing small, to stay playing safe, because things like tall poppy syndrome and whatnot, we get scared. If I'm too big, I might get chopped down. This comes from lots of things. It comes from, everything from, really aggressive abuse to actually just sometimes when we get better than our familial situation, our parents might say, oh, okay, rich guy or whatever, and kind of shame us back down because it's hard to escape the gravity of what your familial level of success is. If you have a group of friends and all of a sudden you become much more successful than your friends, they start to look at you and go, hey, what's going on with you? Or if you really get in shape, but all your friends are still really out of shape, they'll start maybe mocking you like, okay, sexy guy, whatever, and those things become difficult. So there's to have the confidence that it takes to be new and be different. There's all these different reasons why we shrink and why we do this, because it's safer, because it doesn't make us stand out. It doesn't make us take on any kind of criticism. And with what we see online now, some of that criticism can be so loud and from so many directions of just strangers online that if I put out anything online, the bad comments that might come in just from trolls or some bot out there that's just being mean because somebody wrote a program to do it, it ends up hurting our sense of self. And so that's scary. So it's easier to not do it. It's easier to not try. And if I could just survive and sustain, we end up self-sabotaging into that lower level of being.
That's a wonderful explanation of that. Thank you so much. So that's very insightful. Tell me one more thing. Well, we kind of touched upon it earlier on, and that was controlling impulses, in particular negative impulses, things that really do not serve us. What's your thoughts or your recommendation with that?
Yeah. So I think let's talk about it like instant gratification and delayed gratification again, right? That ability to grow your capability to be more for delayed gratification some of the time. I think one of the meta skills to be able to do that is to grow. It's also the meta skill to get away from suffering. It's to be with what is, right? If I can become a kind of person that consistently is more and more okay being with what is, even when it's pleasurable, that I can accept more pleasure, right? That I grow a capacity to be with the good things, but I also grow the capacity to be with the bad things. Because if I'm trying to remain comfortable, right? Comfort is almost, not almost, it's often the enemy of exceptional, right? Because to do anything exceptional, we can imagine these great things, but the work to get there is often very uncomfortable. So we have to find a way to be able to be okay in the discomfort of something. And the ground experience of that is in the moment. Can I be with what is that's uncomfortable? Can I be with my own nervousness? Can I be with a physical pain of working out a little bit longer to get a better workout in? Not to the degree that I'm hurting myself or putting myself in danger, but what is my capacity? Cold showers we know are very good for depression, but people are like, cold showers are uncomfortable, I won't do them, right? And it's like, okay, but what's your capacity to go, I can go get in a cold bath, or I can go get in a cold shower, right? These are little ways. Wim Hof is a great guy that is pushing that coldness, right? A trigger, but that's just one form of, can you be with discomfort in the moment, right? And the less that we can, the more that we're going to follow any impulse of thought or any impulse of addiction or any impulse of, oh, that's going to lead to feeling better, right? And the more unconscious we are, the less conscious tools we have to see where our attention is and what we're actually doing in any moment, the less mastery we're going to have the wisdom to go, this is an uncomfort I should be able to sit with a little bit longer, right? I don't want to do my taxes. I'd rather go watch Netflix, but I'm going to stay in the discomfort for another 15 minutes or another 5 minutes just to get a little further in my taxes. And what you'll find is, even if you just commit to 5 more minutes, you may find that once you're past that hump of resistance, you'll stay for half an hour or 45 and get them done, right? You'll see that it's way easier to stay. And then when you do that, the payoff at the end is you actually feel really happy because you accomplished the thing that was difficult, right? So your sense of self starts to grow, your trust in yourself, your ability to know that I have self-mastery, right? This is one of those core functions of self-mastery. Can I do the difficult thing that is in the service of something that's really good for me, even though it's uncomfortable in the moment? And the more that we can grow that capacity, you will very quickly, even at the first small levels of it, you will see that it pays dividends. You start to go, I can stay with the dishes till they're done. I can organize these papers till they're done. Now you become the kind of person that, if you're good at that, you can actually start to build a small business that's successful. If you can build a small business that's successful, you can build a bigger business that's successful. If you do that, maybe you could actually be the mayor of a town, or what, now you can actually start to influence bigger and bigger things around you because you've become agentic in a way. You have agency over yourself where you're a really powerful person, right? But the beginning of that is, can you manage that impulse control to stay with something a little bit longer than you were before, right?
It brings me back to what we said in the beginning of our conversation about stopping alcohol, which is, I realized that when I did my challenge, that it was an impulse when I wanted to have a drink. It was an impulse which, if I resisted that, it wouldn't last long. It would last maybe a few seconds, maybe a minute, as an intense thought, and then once I stayed with it, it would go away.
Something else comes
never
up.
Think of it.
Something else comes up, right? I mean, that's a part of wisdom also, is that oftentimes it feels like this is going to go on forever, right? But nothing goes on forever. The good things don't go on forever. The bad things don't go on forever. And so if you can instead back up, and this is a little bit of self-transcendence, right? So if we talk about that dimension of things, if you can back up from, I'm not permanently anything, this isn't permanently anything, this thought is not going to persist forever, this great moment is not going to persist forever, so I stop grabbing on. The ego wants permanence. The ego wants, I'm never going to be hurt, I'm permanently safe, I'm permanently okay. but we know that's not true. I mean, eventually we're all going to not be here, right? So like nothing is permanent. Whatever toys you amass in this life, you don't get to take them with you, right? So, that car that you want to keep perfectly and not ever scratch, it's way better to really realize I'd like to keep that car perfect, but if it gets a scratch, yeah, things get scratches. That's what it is. I'll either get it fixed or I'll let it be, or you all of a sudden have a lot more freedom, not trying to hold on or not trying to hold permanent to anything, right?
Mhm. Outstanding.
Yeah.
Rob, tell me about your mission to end suffering on planet Earth. Is that's how I read it? So
That's one of them. I think
okay.
yeah, I mean, I really want to shift consciousness on planet Earth. I
Okay.
want to help human beings have a different relationship with self and with other that's deeply meaningful, that gets us not only to personal excellence, let's say, or personal mastery in some sense,
Mhm.
right? Some ability to become the best version of yourself,
Mhm.
but that's only in service of having the we space, right? Having our systems function well, right? We're at a crisis, and not to be overly dramatic or difficult, but like we're getting to a level of complexity in the world that a lot of our systems are beginning to break down, right? We have a lot of challenges that are catastrophic in their potentiality of being devastating to us. We've just seen with COVID come in,
Mhm.
how much just a virus could affect us, right? If COVID, and we're not through COVID yet, so we really don't know the long-term effects of that. But let's say COVID was just a little bit more deadly than it was, right? It could
Yeah.
have really very much hurt many more of our hospitals and just broken down food systems in ways, right? Um, However you feel about climate change, us being in relationship with our natural environment in a way that's balanced and sustainable is clearly important, right? If we let the rainforest in South America, that's going to affect the rain in North America deeply in a way that could be unsustainable for us, right? So we could have an eruption of a volcano that there's the potential for challenge. We need to be better people or exceptional people so that we can run better societies, so that we can run better companies, so that we can actually evolve meaningfully out of selfish, wasteful, all of the things that a lot of our structures today are leading towards and are out of balance. We need to work toward getting back to balance, right? And that's going to require us to not feel uh, so afraid into comfort zones that we're trying to hold on to, not
Mhm.
be addicted, right? We're going to have AI soon that if we train AI to be like we are, which is what else would we do presently, it's going to be potentially smarter than us and out of balance, right? So what would that lead to? So we really need to figure out foundationally things at a much deeper level. So ending suffering is really important for the individual, and it's also way more attainable. And ending suffering is maybe a dramatic term, but let's say lessening suffering in a meaningful way, right? So that
Mhm.
we suffer less than we are now, or ending unnecessary suffering in some way, right?
Sure.
You will suffer if somebody hurts you, like that's understandable, but delusional suffering or suffering too much, we can lessen that meaningfully. But that's in the service of being a more exceptional person, so that I can be a more exceptional parent, so I can be a
Mhm.
more exceptional friend, so I can be a more exceptional civilian in the world, right? And when we do that, I really see that we could live uh, in a thing that's closer to heaven on earth, right? Than we're seeing now. We have the abundance and we have the capacity that we could live in a much more idealized world, right? Not fully ideal. We're going to consistently have challenges because it's constantly evolving. It's a never-ending game that we're playing, but we could do a lot better at all of those things. And so I forgive me for how messy that description is, but there's really big games that I think we can play
Mhm.
in the immediate, and I think we need to, because I think we're seeing a breakdown in societal understandings and race challenges and all these things that our own meaning making structures can deeply affect and help as we understand them and evolve ourselves in a meaningful way.
Yeah, and it all starts really by changing ourselves. It reminds me of that phrase that many people say they want to change the world, but few people actually want to change themselves.
It's a great point, right? So if you're dysfunctional yourself, often they're the loudest people claiming they want the world to be different, right?
Yeah,
Oftentimes the least powerful people are the ones that are screaming the most about changing things, right? And so a lot of times that's because it's unbalance of power, and there may be reasons for that that are not really what I'm saying. But let's say that you're let's say you're a deficient, slightly addicted, slightly narcissistic, psychologically imbalanced person. You're not the person that should be talking about how to change the world, right? You're the person that should actually be turning the light back on yourself and work on
yeah,
changing yourself in a meaningful way. And societally, we should be figuring out ways to help us all evolve and change ourselves, right? So it's not that it's that all of the onus falls on you, because your unconscious mind is hard to see yourself, right? You're not always going to be able to just change yourself. So this is a we space problem, right? It is in the commons that we could help this. But the first focus is to become functional yourself for sure. Then we can work on how do we change the space, the other people, how do we change that, right?
yeah. Be the change you want to see in the world, right?
Correct. That is definitely the place to start. Yes. If it's not the final answer, it's the first answer for sure. Yeah.
uh, Rob, I want to ask you also some quick fire questions, which are a little bit all over the place. With no particular order, I always start by asking, what does the term personal development mean to you?
I think a lot of what we've already talked about. So, personal development is taking an interest in developing yourself so that you can be happy, effective, psychologically, physically, societally balanced in a way that is meaningful to you, right? So that you can know and connect with a meaningful purpose for yourself, so that you
Mhm.
can have a life that's filled with passion, so that you're not um, self-sabotaging or hurting yourself or others, right? So that you're not addicted. And so that path of developing yourself is exactly what I'm trying to codify into, step one, step two, step three, to take people through what that looks like, to go from anywhere from deep dysfunction to okay function to exceptional function
Mhm.
in all those dimensions of how you think, how you feel, and how you behave. And if you do that well, we have great tools that are helpful to do that, right? We have great tools in thinking, we have great tools in emotional mastery, and we have great tools in applying yourself in the doing space so that you can just live a life that's more evolved.
Sure. And um, even though I'm sure that your difficult past has actually led you to where you are at the moment and it was necessary, but still I will ask, if you had the chance to go back in time and meet your 20-year-old self, what advice would you give him?
That's a great question. So, my let's say younger self, because I'm thinking about, there's probably different things that I would say to a younger version, to the 20-year-old version, to the 30-year-old version, et cetera. Um, the first one was to the really dysfunctional version of me way back when. I would have probably done maybe a little bit of reparenting. I would have loved that person. I would have helped them to feel seen and okay,
Yeah.
and loved and accepted, right? I would have given a base of safety and care and love, like I would do in a parenting relationship, right? I would, at first and foremost, let this person feel safe and okay in their experience of being, right? A more young adult version of myself, I would say, I would start to talk about some of these tools of attention and tools
Mhm.
of unconscious patterns, and really start to share what's available to gain a sense of self mastery, and probably gotten clear on helping that version of myself know what they really wanted. Right. So, not to be all over the place in my answer, I apologize that I'm, shotgun answering a lot of these things. But I think that real personal development and real transformation often can be so profound that you can't even see what it is from where you are. So if you're not fully evolved in whatever way, your version of what you think you need is actually, it's what you think you want, but it's not actually the thing that you want, right? You think you want 5 new clients for your business. You think you want a really sexy body on the beach or whatever. But what you actually want is a deep sense of change in yourself, which looks more like self-mastery and self-actualization and self-transcendence, right? Like those are what you actually should be working on, because those are the master keys to not only get you the body you want and the clients you want and all those things, but everything else you're going to want along the way, because you don't just want that one thing, right? I think that we have a main problem that whatever the problem is in this moment feels as though that's all I need. Like that's my full focus, right? So yeah, I often use the example of if you were to lose your iPhone or your Android, that would completely take over your life for that moment. Be like, where's my phone? Like every other thing on the problem thing would go away and nothing could continue until you get the phone, right? But a way more mature together understanding is that, yes, I might need to find my phone, but the bigger game here is, how can I be okay without a phone? How can I, like that's just a little aspect of myself. So anyway, most of our problems look like that. So if I went back to a younger version of myself, I would show that what you're looking for is actually not external. It's really like an internal game that you should shift your focus to change faster and get there quicker.
That's great. And I'll ask you something else that, again, you probably in some sense have answered. If you could wave a magic wand and change something in the world as it is today, what would you change? I somehow feel like you've given many hints about it, but just as a, your
Boy, there's probably
magic.
lots of them. I'm trying to see if there's a meta one. It might be the ability to shift beliefs. It might be a universal ability to see and change lenses, right? Because then we could have a real conversation about the most useful lenses, not only individually, but also societally, right? So if we don't have that ability, we're going to keep playing into biases that don't serve us and separation and beliefs about others and ourselves that are limiting and hurtful. And that the meta skill, if there's one, would be the ability to really see the mechanism of belief in our life and be able to alter those meaningfully. Yeah, I think that's probably it.
Rob, you have a phrase tattooed on your arm there that says stillness in motion. Yes. What's that about?
So, okay, so we'll go back to meditation for a second, right? So if I teach somebody some of these tools of attention, and through that I'm inviting them to maybe sit in meditation for a minute a day, let's say, it's real simple. And maybe they grow that practice to 10 minutes a day, and they actually start to get this sense of stillness, which is this beauty of being in experience rather than being lost in thought. It doesn't mean there's no thought, but when thought comes up, they can come back to experience. Okay, I'm going to call that stillness, right? There's a quality of stillness in your being that can be really pleasurable, can be really beautiful, can be really okay, right? Then we have to get off the seat, and now we're in motion. Now we're in the doing. Now we're back to time, right? So stillness might be really equated to now, right? It's almost like dealing with time differently. It's like I'm present, I'm here, I'm in the experience of being, right? That's really beautiful and meaningful. But there's also motion. I have to go do things over time. And so I have to use time. I have to model time. I have to use thought, right? So thought's not, we don't want to throw away thought. Thought is super important and it matters. But I want to use thought as a tool. I don't want to be lost in thought as it's the only reality. I want to be able to objectify it and use it as a tool. So most people will get some sense of what stillness means if they try a meditation practice, but then they get into their doing or into the motion of life, and they'll say things like, I got to get back to the meditation cushion, right? Like I have to calm down to find stillness again. And what I think is that's a great evolution. Just to have any access to stillness at all is a great evolution. But what I'm really trying to get people to is that you can have a sense of stillness in motion. You can actually have a quality of being in your doing, where being and doing actually merge and they're not separate things, right? So this is the guy walking down the hallway and every step is beautiful. I actually have a sense of real being here. Like I'm aware of what my seat feels like. I can feel my feet, but I'm also talking and modeling you. And we're dancing in this space of motion, of being, right? Of doing, right? We're doing something like a podcast, but I'm also bringing a real felt sense of being into it. And so I would say that at a higher level, that is stillness in motion, right? It is being still in my doing that is really beautiful. And that starts to look more, and not literally just like this, but more like what you might think Tai Chi looks like or something, right? Like you're literally doing the dishes or giving a speech or talking with friends and being around a fire. Those can be deeply embodied and have a real sense of awakeness and stillness in them. And honestly, this is what flow states look like when you talk to the best athletes as they're kicking ass. And I mean, the best fighters that are doing very aggressive things, the highest version of that has a sense of being in it that's really beautiful. So that's what that means.
Fantastic. Oh, awesome. Something else, is there any major excuse me, aha moment you've had over the last couple of years that you wanted to share?
Boy, I have a lot of aha moments.
I bet.
I wonder
if you had to pick one.
Recently, over the last couple of years, it might be in the relationship space. And I don't just mean romantic, but I mean having an aha on how important. I think that for myself, being okay as an individual and to whatever degree you can be exceptional as an individual that goes a really long way. And I think that maybe pretty recently, I might have even held that in my own life as a really high goal, right? As being just, like when coronavirus hit and we had to quarantine, I was alone here a lot. And I'm, proud, I don't know if that's a great word, but like I was really okay with that because I can be really okay alone. Like quite literally, if you told me I could never see another person, that doesn't scare me that much. Like that's okay. But I think I've had a recent epiphany that there's something in the we space that, because of my past and because other people were so dangerous to me at such an early level, and honestly through my adult life, I've had relationships where people have cheated on me. I've had business agreements where people let me down, right? Trusting in other people has been very difficult for me, right? Like there's a reason maybe my business isn't bigger, is I've had business things fall through. People haven't been their word. They've stolen from me. They've done different things, right? And so I think that I might have had a bias even until pretty recently where I'm going to play small, right? I'm going to optimize this guy. I'm going to do the best work that I can here. But what I want to do now is I want to grow a team that's trustable, that can function really well. I want to help society at a level where the we space, where we govern better and where we have groups better. So I think that there's a big epiphany that I'm still in the process of evolving, of like, how do we do that in a meaningful way? And I heard a podcast recently where they talked about how when you actually ask people what are some of the most meaningful, beautiful things, it's not about getting the car or all the success. It's really about like being around a fire with friends and singing silly songs together or doing whatever. And when I really connect with the moments in my life where I've done that we space being, not that that's required or better than being solitary and okay, but that both of them really matter, right? That growing the capacity to have trusted, amazing community and we space is a really important evolution that we need on planet Earth, and that can be incredibly rich to the individual as well.
Thank you.
Thank you, because I don't know that I explicitly thought of that until you asked me. So I appreciate the question. That's great.
Okay, let me ask you then the other side of the same question. Is there any major learning or mistake in the sense that we understand it that you wanted to share over the last couple of years?
Boy. Yeah, I mean, I make mistakes all the time, so I don't want to pretend. Well, I think that's important, and I don't want to duck your question. I don't know that I have an answer, but I'll try to find one, and I'll try and say something meaningful while I'm looking. I think that resisting mistakes is maybe the biggest mistake, right? The trying to be perfect or trying to not make mistakes. It's a way better way of being to step out and do things. And because our greatest learnings are in those errors, right? So I think a mistake that I might still do more than I want is trying to get things right too often. So I'm in the process of not rebranding in such a big way that things are very different, but I'm really trying to come up with like, I have a lot of individual programs, and we're kind of moving away from individual programs to really talk about the main thing that I do and figure that out like on my websites and do these things. So we're really thinking through rebranding. We could have already rolled out a bunch of things, but I'm trying to get it right, right? I'm trying to not make the mistake. And maybe that is what I'll go with. I think that a big mistake is trying to get things too right. There's a really useful level, and maybe it's 80% or 90% or whatever, where it's good enough to go and test, and then let it be faulty, let it be a little bit wrong. Because number one, you can go way faster when you do that, because there's no such thing as perfect, right? You can get stuck trying to make it perfect. And so you can go way faster, but also in those mistakes, you learn a ton. So I think one of the things I definitely do is I try to avoid making mistakes, probably more than I should. And I should probably open to making even more mistakes than I do now.
That's great. Thank you for sharing that with us. Rob, is there anything that you were hoping we would talk about today and I completely missed asking you?
No, I'm just excited to be here, and I'm really happy to explore this stuff with you. It's really fun to think through it with you and in front of you, and have you bounce stuff back to me. It's been great. So yeah, I think we got to a lot of really important stuff, and I think it's good. Maybe the fact you asked me about personal development, and I broke it into a bunch of different things. I mean, the thing that I have named that is identity shifting. And the reason I talk about it that way is that I want people to really know that there is a much more realized version of themselves that can be attained if they take on personal development, and that the deepest version of that, in the way that I talk about it at least, is really changing who you are in a meaningful way. And by the way, your ego is going to resist that, right? Like the ego doesn't want to change. It wants to get the world to change around it, right? But I'm going to ask a quick question. Is it harder to change the world, or is it harder to change yourself, right? And so if we can get past that and really open to, okay, where am I maybe not wired accurately? Maybe I could gain a couple skills. Maybe there's some things in my ways of being that could change. And I could really take on that I am capable of being different than I am right now, and change who I am, right? That is, now you've changed your identity in a meaningful way. And I've already said this a little bit, but that happens all the time, right? So you're no longer your 5-year-old self. If you're growing, you're no longer your 20-year-old self. If you've become a parent, people know, like, whether you want to or not, you're different as soon as you're a parent. If you take on a business, you're different as soon as you become a business owner, right? So our identity is shifting all the time, but we can do it consciously. We can actually take our conscious attention and shift ourselves. And that is maybe the most powerful thing of being a human being, right? I don't think dogs do that. I don't think birds do that, but humans can do that. And a lot of us don't, but that's really sad, because we can. And if you choose to take it on, there are really profound things in the personal development space that can allow you to not only succeed in all the different levels, but have a quality of life that is much more meaningful and happy and realized than what you may be experiencing today.
Awesome. Rob, how can people find out more about you? Obviously, I'll put them in the show notes, but where would you direct people?
Sure. I think the easiest way is just to go to robscott.com. You can find my podcast there. You can find my different programs there. There's free tools for people. And if anybody wanted to look into working with me, they can find how to do that there as well.
I want to thank you very much for our conversation today. And I will tell you from my heart, honestly, that it's been one of the most fascinating podcast interviews I've done so far. So I really appreciate you, and thank you very much for this.
Well, knowing the quality of people that you've had on in the past, that's a very touching comment. So thank you very much. That means a lot to me. I appreciate it. It's been great to be with you.
Thank you. Any last parting words?
No, just deep gratitude, and I hope that people can take some of these things and have them help. That's my real hope.
Mine too. Thank you very much, Rob. All
right.
the very best.
You too. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much for listening. Please take a moment to subscribe, rate, and review Personal Development Mastery on Apple Podcasts. If you want to know more about me and how I can help you, join my Facebook group Personal Development Mastery. The link is in the show notes, or you can simply type bit.ly/PDM group. And until next time, stand out, don't fit in.